So genre, I guess. I've been thinking recently a lot about genre emulation. I think it's in part because I'm working on my cyberpunk game Sync, and there's a lot of genre emulation in cyberpunk. Like, obviously, like people will just take, images or tropes or aesthetics from what existed in the 80s in cyberpunk, like in Blade Runner, and just like repeat that ad nauseum, adding nothing new to it, like Blade Runner 2049, for example. I realized just the other day that what I'm emulating is 90s cyberpunk. I kind of knew it because I was doing like hackers as one of my touchstones, but also kind of turn of the century in the early 2000s with William Gibson's pattern recognition, and more recently kind of the retro feel and narratives of Halt and Catch Fire, which goes back to kind of like 80s, 90s history in tech and stuff like that. And also Mr. Robot, which is 90s nostalgia, 90s cyberpunk nostalgia. So I'm square in this genre. Like, this is the genre that Sync is in. And it's funny that I just realized it recently. Like, I actually kind of hate genre emulation. Like, I don't think that you're making something new if you're just copying, whatever is genre perfect, like, I think genres exist in order to help us define things, like in the past tense, in an art history way. But if you're not actually, thinking about the content, the context of that content, where it comes from, then you're just copying. It's nothing new is happening. And so, what I'm injecting into Sync that I feel is not just genre emulation is lots of feelings, moves, like things that are defined by people's feelings and like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Emotional labor, which you can see a little bit in some of those things that I mentioned, but I want to dive deeper because that's the stuff that I'm into. So that's kind of how I'm like using genre as a touchstone. Cyberpunk is my touchstone. I like that I'm doing that aesthetic, I'm doing that style, but I'm taking it and making it my own. I don't have cities that look Asian just because cities looked Asian in Blade Runner or in the 80s. And they looked Asian for a reason. I mean, it was a lot of the Cold War paranoia with Japan and Russia in the 80s that informed a lot of the cyberpunk city aesthetic. But when you see it in contemporary cyberpunk, it doesn't make sense because we have different paranoias now and we have different feelings about, globalization and technology. So anyway, that's my Asian cities cyberpunk rant. And I think that, in order for, you can say that a lot of things are genre. I mean, people, when they hear the word genre, it means different things to different people. It means different things to different academics or even media. Movie genre is different from book genre, is different from video game genre, is different from tabletop genre. But, I think that there's kind of like a lot of value in genre as a storytelling tool. If people are familiar with certain things about that genre. Like, we can look to cyberpunk, for example, to be about class struggles, technology, gender issues of autonomy, race issues. A lot of those things are, and like urban life in general. A lot of those things are key touchstones of cyberpunk, which is a lot of the stuff that draws me to it in particular. Like, I love that shit. And so, I think we can, you can use that as like a shortcut to like communicate things very quickly to people. So I think especially in tabletop role-playing games, when you're telling stories, if something is, you know, a genre you've never heard of before, you might have more trouble coming up with stories on the fly. Whereas if it's something you have heard before, it can be a little easier for people to generate ideas. And that's also true of like people buying them. If it's a genre that they know, like, you know, Tolkien fantasy like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, or, you know, D&D, or something that is like a science fiction space opera, like a Star Wars D20, things like that. You know, people are drawn to those bigger, easier storytelling concepts that like exist in the cultural consciousness. And it is often smaller in that sense for games that are about something new or potentially combining two genres, or maybe like in the middle of a genre, for them to succeed, because people, you know, are nervous about trying new things, and that kind of sucks. I think personally, I love trying new things. That's how you learn. I like to continue to learn instead of relying on nostalgia to inform, you know, my storytelling, or how I craft the world, or how I use my imagination or creativity with my friends. So yeah, I don't know, like genre is kind of this trap that we are all like, I don't know, stuck in a lot of the time. I was listening to this Switchblade Sisters podcast, which is amazing. It basically takes it's a lady interviewer, and she interviews other lady directors in Hollywood. I say lady because I'm not sure if she includes trans women, or, you know, non-binary femmes, or, you know, basically anything besides cis women. But it's really cool because they talk about genre films, and how they define genre films on there is pretty interesting, and also how the women talk about their experiences making genre films is really interesting. Like they talked about two I listened to recently, where they pick a movie not that the woman director made. So I was listening to one that was George Romero's, George Romero, is that right? I think that's right. Witches of Eastwick movie with, you know, Jack Nicholson, Susan Sarandon, and Cher. And they're actually talking about how Witches of Eastwick was difficult to sell, apparently, to Hollywood. Like, it walked this weird line between being like supernatural drama and like the neighborhood drama of like real people. And because it was in the middle, and at the time that was kind of, you know, urban fantasy and stuff wasn't as big as it is now, or you know, what's it called? Charmed didn't exist yet. You know, they had a lot of trouble selling the movie, and so, you know, the producers were like, we need to put some action in here, and we'll sell it as an action movie. And like, how weird is that? Like, they needed to actually recontextualize the narrative of the film in order to like sell it to Hollywood, in order to like convince, you know, money people that it would be a success and it would be fine. And like, you know, a lot of the reason that remakes do well in Hollywood, if we're going to continue using the film industry as like an example, is because of the nostalgia factor. They know that people will go see something that they're familiar with. It's an easier sell. Another Batman movie, another Godzilla, you know, another Marvel movie. Like, it's a sure thing. And you can see that too in tabletop role-playing games. I mean, how many second edition, third edition things do you see? They get bigger and more ostentatious, more expensive every time, and that's cool. I'm glad they're succeeding, but it kind of pushes out the possibility for new things to also exist if we're just relying on like that nostalgia feel, you know? So I don't know what my point is here. I guess just like genre is weird, and I think you should be aware of like how you're using it, what tropes you're using from that genre, like you know, why you're paying attention to something that is genre. Is it like this nostalgia and this feeling that you already know it? you know, a feeling of comfort, or, you know, fear to step outside of that, right? And are those tropes being used the right way? Like, or are you just making, you know, cities look kind of Asian because you feel like that's the aesthetic and you haven't really examined that very much? So I don't know. Genre is weird. Tell me your thoughts about genre. You know, do you think that, are you more drawn to like the heavy nostalgia genre, tabletop role-playing games, or are you more into like trying the mixed genre or new genre things? Do you care about genre at all? Let me know in the comments below. And like always, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to know when I put out a new video. It'll just kind of like send it to you on your subscription stream, I think, on YouTube. And share with your friends if you like what I'm doing here. You can support me on my Patreon. That's a big deal. That is my main source of income right now. And that is Kira Magrann, Patreon/Kira Magrann, however that is. And thanks for watching. I hope you have a lovely weekend.